EU4 has seen some major changes when it comes to the estates, especially with the recent updates to the game. So today we're going to be going through the estates and we're going to be explaining everything there is to know about them. And that means we're going to be taking it one by one: clergy, nobility, burghers. We'll talk about the estate statutory, how to gain crownlands fast, the various Indian estates, the dhimmis, the Cossacks, all the special privileges that have been added in the past, 4 DLCs already, and whether you should take them, when you should take them, or when you should cancel them, as well as the monopolies, because I know that can be a little bit of a interesting topic, with some people hating the monopolies, some people loving the monopolies. Reality is, guys, that if you know how to handle your estates in EU4, you really do have better games overall, because the estates are meant to help improve your gameplay, and knowing what privileges to give over here and when to revoke these privileges really makes you a much better EU4 player. So I think the first thing you probably know if you've seen some of my videos before, if you haven't, you're gonna learn it right now, is that you should always give out the +1 mana privileges if you have 30% crownlands available. Most nations have 30% crownlands, some nations have less than that, and some nations have more than that. Now, if say you have less than 30%, you should definitely prioritize admin privilege as well as the military privilege. So you get 1 extra admin point and 1 extra military points per month for the rest of the game. And then if you do have 30%, give out the third privilege, meaning you're getting +1 mana points per month for the remainder of the game. That means you never cancel these 3 privileges. Even during the age of absolutism, you do not cancel these privileges. You can get 100 absolutism without having to cancel these 3 privileges by doing the court and country disaster, which offers extra maximum absolutism. So now that we have that out of the way, I'm gonna quickly explain this screen here. As you can see, your nation's crownlands are divided between the various estates, with each estate owning a certain amount of land. So the Umera here controls 46%. That is the nobility, the Umera. Sometimes the nobility has different names. All of these states have different names based on what country you're playing as. But in general, the red one is the nobility, the yellow one is the clergy, blue one is the merchant guilds or burghers, dhimmi is the gray one, I guess, and white one is the crownlands, or how much you own directly. This direct ownership of land signifies how much land is owned by the monarchy itself. So right now we have 0% because we started with 30% and we gave that 30% away to the various estates when we gave out the +1 mana privilege. Because as you can see here, when you give out +1 mana privilege, you give away 10% crownlands, and it also lowers the overall loyalty for your estates by 5%. This is the loyalty equilibrium. So let's talk about loyalty and influence equilibrium next, because that is really important to know. The loyalty equilibrium signifies the maximum amount of loyalty that your estates will be trying to reach. So if the equilibrium is 30% here, then it's going to be decreasing by 0.26% per month until it reaches 31%. If the equilibrium is 60%, it's going to be increasing every month so that it matches the equilibrium amount of 60%. Same goes for the influence. Now, why is equilibrium here important, and why is loyalty and influence? What does it actually represent? It is basically a way of balancing out your estates. You always want to have more loyalty than you have influence, because in order to revoke privileges, you need to have more loyalty than influence. Right now we have 18% influence and 50% loyalty, so we can revoke privileges. If you seize crownlands and you have below 50% loyalty for any of your estates, then you're going to get rebels for those particular estates. If you have 50 or above, then you're not going to get rebels whenever you do seize crownlands. An easy way to get a little bit of loyalty is to summon the diet, and then that's going to give you 5% loyalty flat. That means you instantly get that loyalty rather than having to wait for that loyalty to increase every month. That also gives you 5% influence though, so keep that in mind. Now, whenever you summon the diet, you basically get a mission here. You get to choose between 3 missions, and you get to do that mission and get some rewards in exchange. And you always have 3 missions available. If you have multiple estates and not just 3 estates, sometimes the 3rd mission is offered, or the 2nd mission is offered by another estate. It is not always the same estates that offer the mission. So here we have the Umera, the burghers, and the ulema, basically the initial 3. But we might also get a mission from the dhimmis, which is a unique Muslim estate that we'll be going into afterwards. Some of these are very easy to do, like develop tax, develop manpower or production, have 75% manpower. This is a nasty one because if you declare war without having 75% level of manpower, which in our case would be what, 23,000 manpower or something like that, then you fail this estate agenda and then you get -5 loyalty equilibrium for 20 years. So whatever mission you go for, make sure you can actually do that mission. Go for the easiest one that you can take. Then afterwards, we'll be seizing Crownlands. So we also want to discuss this particular interaction here, the Crownlands debuffs or buffs. As you probably noticed, based on the amount of Crownlands, that is the white estate here, we get either debuffs or buffs. The lowest debuff is you can get monthly autonomy plus 0.4, absolutism a -40% I think, and liberty desire from subject development 150, tax -20%, efficiency. Also want to mention that you can sell titles and that's going to give you a flat amount of money, and in exchange you're going to be losing 10% of the Crownlands. So that is a pretty nasty interaction. If you do this, make sure you have enough Crownlands available to sell. You used to be able to cheese this before and you could sell if you had just like 0.1% Crownlands. Doesn't work anymore. And it's actually a good thing because that was basically an exploit end of the day. I also want to mention that this debuff right here is a little bit misleading because Liberty Desire from subject development is irrelevant if you do not have subjects, or even if you do have subjects, it's not as bad as it seems. I'm going to illustrate that by tag switching over to the Timurids. Let's go. Console command gamer right there, boys. I already expect the Reddit post to be like, yo, Ludi made his estate guide using consoles, bros. So let's check out these bad boys here. We are going to take, for example, Sistan, right? 43% Liberty Desire without having the malice from the Crownlands. Now we're going to give the +1 admin, military, and diplo, so we're going to get +150% Liberty Desire from subjects development. That equates to 5% Liberty Desire for Sistan. It does equate to a lot more for Transoxiana, Fars, and Afghanistan because these are bigger nations and they have more development, but that can easily be negated, especially for the Muslims, by giving out certain privileges like the strong duchies that gives you +2 diplo relations and Liberty Desire from subjects -10%. You can also give out the lenient taxation, again -15% Liberty Desire in subjects. So we went down to 83% for Transoxiana. You can do a lot of other things like personal interactions, placate local rulers, develop their provinces, lowers Liberty Desire by another 5% every time you develop it. So you can go 1, 2, there you go, that lowered it by another 10%, and so on. And then based on how much land you have, the Liberty Desire also goes down. So it's really not as bad as it seems, this debuff right here of Liberty Desire from subject development. Next up, the absolutism is irrelevant. Absolutism spawns in the 1600s, guys. I don't even know why it's shown on this screen because, okay, it's -50%. Doesn't matter because by the time that absolutism appears, we will have more Crownlands since that's easy to fix in the next 200 freaking years, right? National tax modifier -20% is kind of negated because you will have plus up to 15 national tax modifier from your clergy estate here. Right now it's +5 for us. After we give out some more privileges, it will be +15. So you only get 5% tax modifier debuff. But then again, you can seize Crownlands, so it's going to be -15, which will be negated by the +15, so it's going to be 0 tax debuff overall. So then we go to the last one here, and this is the one that actually matters, the monthly autonomy change. If you don't know what autonomy does in a country, autonomy essentially tells you how much income and manpower you're going to be getting from those provinces. So that means if you have 100% autonomy in a province, you're getting almost nothing from it, barely anything at all, pretty much not even worth keeping the province around. If you have 0% autonomy, then you get all of the income, all of the manpower, all of the everything from that particular province. Now this debuff here, the monthly autonomy 0.2, is pretty significant because it monthly increases the autonomy. So we don't want the autonomy to go up, right? But not to worry, because within within the first 10 to 15 years, we will get 20% crownlands. And once you have 20% crownlands, you do not get the autonomy debuff anymore. How are we going to get that crownlands? Quite easily. We're going to be seizing it every 5 years. So we can seize again in 1449. So that means within 15 years, we get 15% crownlands. And the other 5% we can get from Conquest. Sometimes we can get even 20% crownlands from Conquest. So to give out an example here, I'm going to be attacking a gem, and I'm going to be making sure that I enforce my peace quickly so I can show what I'm talking about. I'm going to use a little bit of console commands, yes man, and we're going to be taking their lands here. Now take note, the amount of crownlands that you get from seizing provinces from another country is influenced by the amount of influence that your estates have. So the lower the influence that your estates have, the more crownlands you get. The higher the influence that your estates have, the less crownlands you get from Conquest. So right now you can see it says here, we are lowering the ownership of land for the nobility, for the burghers, the dhimmis, and the clergy by what, like almost 10% here. So right now we have 5%. After I enforced this deal, we went up from 5% to 14.7%. That is a massive amount, guys. That means we basically got 15% almost, and in 5 years we can seize another 5% crownlands, so we go up to 20% crownlands, which means that we don't get any autonomy debuff. Now by contrast, I reloaded the save game and I gave out some privileges to increase the influence for my estates, and as consequence, after we take this land from a gem, the difference is massive because we only got 9.1 crownlands, so we gained 4% crownlands, almost half of the amount that we gained with lowered influence for our estates. So it's super important that you have low influence for your estates whenever you're trying to get crownlands from Conquest especially. But in general, you want to make sure you keep the influence for all of the estates as low as possible, because then it's easier for you to control them, revoke the privileges whenever you need to revoke them without worrying about even triggering disasters. Because remember, once your influence for any estate reaches 100%, you will start getting a ticking disaster for that particular estate that you do not want to get. I also want to add right now a little bit of talk about the estate statutory. A lot of people don't know whether you should give the estate statutory or not give the estate statutory. I'm going to be really plain with this. Do not give the estate statutory. It's a trap. It is not worth it. 100% not worth it. And hear me out why. What does the estate statutory actually give you? It gives you, I think, around 30% or something like that lands. And in exchange, every single province that you have gives 25% autonomy by default. So that means the moment that I click this, look at that, I clicked it. Oh, I got 30% crownlands. But here's the boo-boo, boys. I cannot revoke the estate statutory for 20 years minimum. Plus, it increases my influence by 10%. So influence is going to be pretty high compared to the loyalty. If you don't know how to handle this, you might get stuck with the estate statutory. Plus, it offers 25 autonomy minimum in every single province. Now that we had the proper rant about the estate statutory, let's actually talk about what privileges to give to the estates. I know it's been a while. Thank you for watching this video, by the way. I know it's a little bit of a longer video also, but it is really important. And honestly, after you watch this whole thing and you properly understand it, you will never need to worry about estates again. So, when it comes to the clergy, guys, aside from the +1 mana privilege, you also want to give out the -25 advisor cost reduction. In fact, you want to give this one out to all 3 of the estates, but you want to give it out after you have at least 1 stability, because you need 1 stability to get passive prosperity in your provinces. So you're going to wait for 1 month at least, get that 1 stability. I know that there's a lot of other privileges here, but most of these are either super situational or irrelevant in my opinion. The land rights is extremely good to give out, especially if you're doing a world conquest or if you're doing a wide game in which you're playing as a nation that expands a lot. Well, the +100 governing capacity is really going to help out. Take note, it is going to cost you 5% crownlands, so you likely want to give this privilege out later on in the mid-game or in the 1500s whenever you have enough crownlands to give out this privilege and you need the governing capacity. Clerical ministers, irrelevant, absolutely don't need this ever. Oversight by the ulema, you do not want to give this, especially in the recent update. So here's the thing, right? Why is this not a good thing anymore? It gives you 10% influence and 10% 10% loyalty. Now, the loyalty is great, but it takes out one privilege slot and it gives out the influence. And the reality is that because we now have 6 privilege slots available to our estates, we can get that 10% loyalty from other privileges that are a little bit more vital. But that being said, if you really have nothing else that you can give out, sure, you can give out the oversight by the clergy. I would leave this as my last privilege to give if I need to give it out. Enforced unity of faith is pretty good if you want to convert provinces, plus it gives you 10% loyalty and 0 influence. So you can give this out and then you already have your loyalty threshold at 41%, which is already way above the influence threshold. Expansion of zealotry is super good because it offers 5% morale of armies when fighting against heretics and heathens. So if you're playing as a country that has a lot of heretics and heathens around it, you want to give this privilege out. If you're playing as Brandenburg, you do not want to give this out in the beginning because look at this, boys. There's no heretics and heathens around you. There's only Catholics. So this privilege has a debuff as well. If you're fighting against nations of the same religion, you get -5 morale of armies. So you're actually giving yourself a debuff. This is a bit situational. Basically, give it out whenever you have a lot of different religions surrounding you so you can get a bonus attacking them. Religious culture was added recently, and this is actually an interesting privilege because religious cultures, not only does it improve the amount of time to convert provinces, but it also makes it 10% cheaper to convert provinces to your culture. So if you're doing a one faith or anything of the sorts, you want to convert everybody to your primary culture, you can give this privilege out before, and it's going to make it a little bit faster. Take note though, it does cost 5% crownlands and 20 influence, so make sure you do have extra loyalty if you give out this privilege. Religious diplomats is super good as well, but it does give 15% influence. I do recommend, however, you give out the religious diplomats if you start out as a Catholic nation, because that means you have 25 relations with all other Catholic nations. So that's going to make it a lot easier to get alliances. Established religious schools is unique to the Muslim group, and it allows you to invite a scholar at no cost. Basically, the Muslims have this here. They get bonuses based on what scholars they invite, and it does cost 50 admin, but if you give this privilege out, then it costs no admin. I think you should not give this privilege though, because it does give 10% influence and only 5% loyalty. It's not worth it for 50 admin points, taking up an entire privilege slot, which can be filled by anything else that's way better. Grant local residence to scholar, a little bit similar to this one. Basically, it's tied to the Muslim group. It allows you to invite a scholar without having to get the relations with the nation. So each one of these privileges here, you can give out if you have relations with specific nations. So with this privilege, you don't need that anymore. There are other privileges to the clergy or the church, whatever you want to call it, based on what your religion is. So I tagged into the Teutons because the Teutons have maintenance reduction -20% for missionary. Not worth it. Gives out a lot of influence. Missionaries don't cost that much when converting provinces anymore. Next up, we'll be talking about the nobility estate. Obviously, same thing goes for the land rights. Give this out whenever you need to for the extra governing capacity. 100% worth it. In my opinion, 3 privileges you should always give out to the 3 main estates, and that is the +1 mana privilege, the +100 governing capacity privilege, and the -25% advisor cost reduction privilege. Always give these 3 out because they're 100% worth it. One other privilege that I really encourage you guys to give out is the Umera and the Officer Corps. Now, this is going to make you lose up to 15 army tradition based on when you give this out, but it's going to make your generals 10% cheaper and yearly army tradition decay -0.5. Army tradition basically decays at a certain rate, and this is going to make it slower to decay the army tradition, which means you're always going to have stronger units by having higher army tradition. Because remember, army tradition increases your morale of armies, siege ability, map recovery speed, as well as the Umera or the nobility loyalty equilibrium. That's right, you get up to 5% loyalty equilibrium from having 100% army tradition. Similarly, you get 5% clergy equilibrium by having 100% religious unity. So we got 94. If we had 100%, we would get 5%. We're getting 4.7% religious loyalty equilibrium right now. Increased levies is super good, but it's worth only if a lot of your lands belong to the nobility. So in our case, as the Ottomans here, 43% belongs to the nobility, and that offers 20% manpower. That's a massive buff, by the way, guys. And only 10% extra influence is not much. It does not cost any crownlands, and because we do have 6 privilege slots available now, super worth it until you start losing nobility crownlands share. So if you have like 10% of the crownlands owned by the nobility, it's not worth it anymore. You can start revoking this bad boy. Supremacy over the Sublime Port is sometimes good, especially at the start of the game if you just quickly need a quick jab of loyalty and influence for your estates. You can give this out. Do remember, it gives 10% loyalty and influence for all of your estates, not just the nobility, all of them. That means the Merchants Guild, the clergy, the dhimmis all get 10% loyalty and influence, so weigh that in whenever you do give it out. Command of the military offers +1 yearly army tradition, which is a massive amount, but it also means that recruiting leaders adds 5% influence, and leader cost is 20% higher. I personally think you do not need this. There's a lot of other reforms, plus the previous privilege that we gave out here that lowered the army tradition decay, that increase your army tradition a lot better than having to give this privilege out. If you're really starved of army tradition, you could potentially give it, like say in a multiplayer, but the debuffs are too massive, in my opinion, for a single player game. 100% not worth it. Next up, let's go with the Merchants Guild. Not gonna mention the ones that I mentioned before, is the same thing. The different part is that you also have the Admiral cost -25 and Navy tradition decay. That is worth it sometimes if you are a naval power. If not, I wouldn't recommend you give that out. Patronage of the Arts, you should always give this out for the extra prestige and yearly prestige that it offers. And whenever you can cancel this out and give it out again because it gives you flat amount of prestige. Take note, if you have a really low prestige, like -50 prestige, instead of 15, you get 25 prestige from giving out this privilege. So whenever you disinherit heirs, make sure you disinherit and give the privilege after you've disinherited your heir. Indebted to the Merchants Guild is a really useful privilege because it offers you 5 loans at 1% interest. That means that you're going to pay only 0.68 interest for 900 ducats almost that we just got from these loans here. So it's always worth getting this. Compared to a regular loan, check this out. One loan, regular, literally is the equivalent of 5 loans from the Burger Estate. We're paying 0.6 ducats in interest for that 4% loaner compared to the very little that we're paying for the 1% loans. And this automatically cancels itself now with the recent updates after you've paid off the loans. So whenever you have the money, you can pay off the 1% loans. And there you go, we do not have the privilege anymore. It canceled itself and you can just give it out again whenever you want to. Take note, you do lose 1% mercantilism and it gives you -5% trade efficiency. Private trade fleets, super worth it, especially if you're a trading power, because it makes it 20% cheaper recruiting light ships and gives some ship trade power propagation. Control over monetary policies, 100% not worth it, and here's why. The inflation reduction is not a big deal. Inflation in general is honestly easier to just reduce with the admin points whenever you have it really high. Interest per annum is okay, but not really worth it either. Production efficiency is very little. The big problem is that it offers all power cost plus 5%. That means every single thing that costs mana points is 5% more expensive. That is a too big of a cost in my personal opinion, since it means everything, man. Like war exhaustion is going to be 5% more expensive, increasing stability 5% more expensive, lowering inflation 5% more expensive. So it's a completely, utterly massive trap, just like the estate statutory. Now, there are some special estates here that are available only to certain religions or to certain areas of the map, like the dhimmis available to the Muslims. The dhimmis, if you have them, give out the governing capacity plus 100 because, again, you likely will be playing wide as a Muslim nation, so you want to have as much governing capacity as possible. Some of these privileges help you get more money out of these estates, like the dhimmi taxes. Some of them make it so that the religious unity from these particular heretics or heathens don't count. So like if we give out the guaranteed dhimmi autonomy, which the Ottomans start with by default, it doesn't matter that we have a lot of Orthodox provinces in the Balkans. These Orthodox provinces do not count towards our overall religious unity. We still have lowered religious unity because we have Shia provinces here in Chivas, and these do count. So it's not heretics, it's only heathens that don't count. You also can get leaders without upkeep +1. Not a bad privilege early on, I guess. Later on, once you have higher land force limit, it's not worth giving out anymore. Conscript Dhimmis is a little bit expensive in my opinion for just 20% local manpower modifier. I would not give this out. Grand Dhimmi nobility liberties, not a bad privilege because you will struggle to get to 50% sometimes with the Dhimmi privileges. But if you're the Ottomans here, which starts with the Dhimmi autonomy granted that offers 20% loyalty, then it's irrelevant giving out the Dhimmi liberties, so you do not need to give this out. We also have the Cossacks estate available to nations that own provinces in the steppes and are Catholic, Orthodox, and so on. Now, the Cossacks are a really interesting faction or estate because they offer some insanely good bonuses like cavalry combat ability and so on. And some of their privileges are absolutely amazing. I would give out all of these if I could, but you have to restrict yourself to 6 of them, so keep that in mind. Obviously, governing capacity without the saying yes, give it out. Cossack Expeditionary, yes, also give it out. -15 local development in steppe provinces. So, especially in multiplayer, this is pretty much a meta at this point. Cossack Self-Governance, I would not give unless you need extra loyalty to go above 50%, but you definitely will get that loyalty from other privileges. Established Cossacks Regiments, 100% worth it, but do take note, it is gonna make you lose 5% crown lands. Once you give this out, you can start recruiting the Cossacks units, which means you get 10% less shock damage, but you can only have a certain amount of them. You can get 10% of your entire land force limit Cossacks when you give this privilege out, and then later on you can expand the Cossacks regiments by giving out the second privilege, another 5% crown lands, but it lets you recruit up to 25% of your land force limit as Cossacks. Yearly army tradition and land leader shock, absolutely amazing. Give it out even though it gives the influence, and it doesn't cost any crown lands, which is great. And the army tradition can be mixed in with the army tradition DK from the nobility, so you can get a lot of army tradition pretty early on with the Cossacks estate. Prime herding rights is good also if you want extra manpower. It lowers the tax income that you get from provinces that are steppe provinces, but it increases the manpower. So I guess this is a little bit situational. If you want more manpower from your steppe provinces, give it out. If you don't want it, it's your choice. I personally think it's worth it because manpower is one of the most important things in the game, and your income is not going to come from tax. It's going to come from predominantly production and trade. Next up, I want to talk about the Indians because they do have some unique estates here. The main 3 estates here, Brahmins, Marathas, Jains, are basically the burghers, the clergy, and the nobility. And the 4th one is a little bit different because it's kind of like splitting apart the nobility in half and mixing it in with the burghers. But if you just go through the privileges, you'll quickly see they are the exact same privileges, just given out to different estates. So you have the +1 mana privilege, governing capacity ones, advisor cost reduction ones, nothing massively different, supremacy over the crown. Then you go and you have the same thing here. The Rajput estate has these special Rajput regiments. It's kind of like the Cossack estate. Give this out. It allows you to recruit the Rajput infantry, and the Rajput infantry also have unique modifiers, I believe, extra morale of armies, which is good. Also should have mentioned that you always want to give out the subjects rights or the strong duchies that offers 2 extra diplomatic relations and liberty desire. Plus you want to give the integration policy because this automatically cancels itself after you've integrated your vassals. It does give extra liberty desire for subjects, so keep that in mind. The big thing is that it doesn't give you the -3 diplo reputation malice after you've integrated vassals, so 100% worth it just for that alone. Otherwise you would have to wait for 10 years between integrating each vassal. This way you don't need to wait, you just continuously start integrating all the vassals that you want to integrate. Also, there are some extra privileges here. For the Jains, you get the extra state maintenance and dev cost reduction, 100% worth it, because state maintenance is actually kind of expensive, especially in the early game when you don't have much of an economy. So giving the state maintenance -25 makes this a lot cheaper, especially when you give out the edicts for your states, which makes it 300% more expensive to maintain that state. Getting that privilege, making it 25% cheaper, is totally worth it. That's like almost 0.2 ducats, and 0.2 ducats is a big deal in the early game. Conscientious objections, never give this out. It offers national manpower minus 10%. It's totally not worth it for the 0.10 corruption reduction. Indebted to the Jains is the same as the indebted to the burghers. Levy war contributions, 100% worth it also. Makes it so that you pay only 1 mana point to get the war taxes enacted. One other privilege available to the Muslims here in the Indian Peninsula is the legacy to rule. Offers 25% religious unity. You will struggle with your religious unity if most of your country doesn't follow your religion. So if that's the case, you can give this out. It definitely will be of massive help. And you can just cancel it out whenever you do convert the rest of the country to your religion. There are other privileges that are available to nations based off of specific DLCs, like the Lions of the North added the mountain expansion for the Norwegians, which makes it 50% cheaper to develop provinces. Well, negates the malus by 50% to develop mountain provinces. So 100% worth giving that out if you want to develop mountain provinces. These are situational, but in most cases, these DLC specific privileges for specific countries are worth it because they will give you a big bonus. Otherwise, you know, you wouldn't need to pay the certain amount of money to get access to that privilege in the first place, right? And there are certain privileges that you have to get rid of, like the Danish nobility, the nobles court that the Norwegians start with, and they have to get rid of. All you need to do is follow whatever the text says here. One stability, and you need to wait for 20 years after you revoke this one to get rid of the second one, I believe. Plus, you need to have more loyalty than you have influence. So in this case here, how do we do that easily? Well, we just give out privileges that have more loyalty than they have influence, like the monopolies. Plus, we can also sell titles right before we cancel stuff, which will increase our loyalty instantly by 10%. And since I did touch upon the monopolies, I also want to discuss this because this is a very highly debated topic. Should you give out monopolies? Should you not give out monopolies? Prior to the Lions of the North DLC, I would have said, no, don't give out monopolies unless in very, very specific situations, because you get only 4 privilege slots, so it's not really worth it. But with the new update, you get 6 privilege slots available. So monopolies are back on the table, guys. They are actually worth it now. But still, they are quite situational, and I'm gonna talk about that right now. What do monopolies do in the first place? First off, they give you 10% loyalty and 0 influence. Keep that in mind because that is really important. A lot of the times you want to give out monopolies when you need more loyalty than influence, so you can cancel out other privileges that you don't need anymore and are just sitting there. That being said, once you give out a monopoly, what a monopoly does is it gives you upfront the amount of income that you would have received for that specific good for the next 8 years. But it takes away whatever income you're getting from that good for the next 10 years. Plus, you're getting one mercantilism, and every 10 years you can renew this privilege. You also cannot cancel it for 10 years after you've enacted. And once you want to cancel it, you have to not renew it. And then after you don't renew it, you need to have more loyalty than influence to cancel it. If you do not have more loyalty than influence, then you cannot cancel it, and you're also not getting the money from it. So you're kind of stuck with it. Keep that in mind. Don't fall in that loophole. Now, also important, guys, I personally recommend you give out monopolies either when you're about to lose a specific good. So, for example, we have wine here in the south of France. A lot of the times, players prefer to abandon their French provinces as the English, or they prefer to release a vassal. The only wine provinces that we have are there in the south of France. So if we give out the wine privilege, we got 1 mercantilism, we got 40 ducats, and then afterwards we released the nation of Gascony, which means we don't have any more wine provinces, so we lost the privilege. There you go, no more monopoly, but we did manage to cheese that a little bit, and we got some money as consequence. This is, of course, highly situational. Also take note, give out this privilege only when in the next 10 years you do not expect to be getting provinces of that particular trade good. So I gave out the wool privilege. That means in the next 10 years I'm not taking any wool provinces from anyone. If I was to take wool provinces, I would get 0 production income from wool in the 10 years. Even though it's a new province, I'm getting 0 production income, so I'm basically losing out on that province's production income. But not going to be conquering new wool, so it's not really any sort of a loss. And that extra mercantilism can actually be worth it, especially for trade nations and for the English. And even though you're not getting the production income, you're still getting the trade income from that wool that is being produced in your provinces. so you're winning out. But of course, only give out monopolies if you have extra privilege slots available. Prioritize the previous privileges that I talked about, and remember to cancel the monopolies if you need to make slot for other privileges, or you just don't need the money anymore. So we went up to 50% crownlands, and that gave us maximum absolutism +5 and reform progress growth +20%. This was changed in the recent update. Before it gave other bonuses, the reform progress growth is 100% worth it and a lot better now, because reform progress growth is vital since we have a lot more reforms now, up to 12 reforms for that matter. So getting above 50% crownlands is worth it. Of course, you can also sell titles and lose 10% crownlands if you need the money, but I personally think that after you've given out the +1 mana privilege for all 3 of the estates at the beginning, the next step that you should be doing is you should be saving up your crownlands to get at least 50% crownlands. The sooner the better to get that extra reform progress growth. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little bit longer, but if you enjoyed it and you want to see me do a similar video explaining the war and army mechanics as well as the army composition with the new update, then let's get 10,000 likes on this video in the first week. If I see support for this, it means that you guys are interested, and I will be making that other video as well. And until the next time, check out this awesome Sweden video. And I want to give a massive thank you to all of my patrons, channel members, and Twitch subscribers. I would not be able to do this without all your support. If anybody else would like to also support me, you will find the links in the description.